Russian President Vladimir Putin says the war in Ukraine may be coming to an end, marking one of his strongest public signals yet that Moscow could eventually be open to broader settlement after more than 4 years of fighting. Speaking to reporters after Russia's Victory Day event in Moscow, Putin said he was willing to hold direct talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, either in Moscow or in a neutral country. But there was an important condition. Putin said any meeting with Zelenskyy should happen only after terms of peace agreement have already been finalized, suggesting that the Kremlin still wants negotiations largely settled before any face-to-face summit between the two leaders. The comments come as Russia and Ukraine continue observing a short 3-day ceasefire backed by the United States while also discussing possible prisoner exchanges. However, despite the temporary truce, the war itself is far from over. Ukrainian officials said Russia attacks killed at least 3 people on Sunday, while nearly 150 combat engagements were reported along the front lines within just 24 hours. So while diplomacy is being discussed publicly, fighting is still continually intensifying on the ground. Putin also used the moment to once again blame the West for prolonging the conflict, accusing NATO countries of escalating tensions through military support for Kiev. Russia has long argued that NATO's eastward expansion threatens its security and used that argument to justify its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Speaking after the Victory Day parade, Putin claimed Western governments had expected Russia to collapse under sanctions and military pressure, but said that strategy had failed. At the same time, the Russian president signaled that he may be open to broader security talks with Europe, even mentioning former German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder as someone who he would prefer to engage with diplomatically. Schröder has remained a controversial figure in Europe because of his close relationship with Putin and his previous involvement in Russia's energy projects after leaving office. The timing of Putin's remarks is significant. After years of war, both Russia and Ukraine are under growing pressure. Ukraine has suffered massive destruction across parts of the east, while Russia's economy has faced mounting strains from sanctions, military spending, and international isolation. Moscow currently controls nearly 1/5 of the Ukrainian territory, but despite years of fighting, Russian forces still have not completely captured the Donbas region. Ukraine, meanwhile, has also struggled to reclaim major occupied areas through its counter-offensives. Putin's comments also come at a time when the United States ramps up pressure for at least a temporary pause in the fighting. US President Donald Trump, who made ending the Ukraine war a central promise of his 2024 campaign, recently backed the latest ceasefire and described it as a possible beginning of the end of the conflict. But major disagreements remain unresolved. Russia continues to demand full control over the Donbas region and exposes Ukraine joining NATO. Ukraine, on the other hand, refuses to formally surrender territory and insists that any future deal must include strong international security guarantees. Analysts caution against reading too much into Putin's latest comments. Some experts say there have been repeated moments over the past 2 years where hopes of a breakthrough emerged, only for negotiations to collapse and fighting to intensify again. Others argue that Russia may simply be looking for a pause rather than a permanent settlement, especially if the Kremlin believes the battlefield situation could still improve in its favor. For now, the ceasefire remains limited, the fighting continues, and despite more conciliatory language coming from Moscow, a lasting peace deal still appears distant. For more such explainers, subscribe to DawnNews English.